Hey folks, welcome back to my channel. I hope you are all in good spirits and ready to enjoy a delightful tale. This is a personal story that fills me with positivity, and I am excited to share it with you. It all began with a disagreement between my son and me. The issue at hand was relatively insignificant. We had inherited a small plot of land from my late wife. While I wanted to preserve the cottage as a cherished memory of my wife, my son wished to sell it and invest the proceeds into a business venture. Our argument escalated into a heated dispute, which ultimately led to a physical altercation. In the end, my son stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. To be honest, I have no idea how my son was doing for the next 5 years. We rarely spoke, and our conversations were always brief and superficial, consisting of the typical, "How are you?" "I'm fine" exchanges. Who knows how much longer we would have gone without seeing each other if it weren't for his chance encounter with a lovely young woman. Anya was full of youthful optimism and saw the world as a warm and welcoming place. When my son proposed to her, she decided to bring our families together. One day, I received a call from a sweet, girlish voice on our home phone. It was Anya introducing herself and insisting that we meet in person. In my nearly 60 years of life, it had been a long time since I received such an invitation, so I gladly accepted. That evening, I took the time to dress up. I put on a tie and swapped my usual sneakers for shoes. Essentially, I dressed like a well-dressed man from the village in the late 90s. Anya, on the other hand, didn't put much thought into her attire. She arrived at our meeting in jeans and a shirt. However, the effortless charm of youth transformed her casual outfit into a stunning ensemble. We spent some time chatting in a cafe before I walked the lovely girl back to her home. Throughout our conversation, Anya emphasized the importance of family and the need to reconcile with my son. In hindsight, I was always open to the idea, and if I had known how things would turn out, we would have sold the cottage after all. Especially since my son had a talent for business and quickly became quite successful. I had no desire to spend my days growing potatoes and cucumbers. Anya mentioned that Anton was not opposed to making amends, but his pride prevented him from taking the first step and accepting my help. So we were left to hope for a chance encounter. But as they say, hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. Anya came up with a plan to bring us together in the supermarket. I was supposed to visit the store near my son's workplace on Friday evening and browse through the vegetable section. Anya would bring Anton there as well, but dressed in more casual attire, she requested before parting ways. Her plan worked perfectly. We bumped into each other completely by chance, near the tangerines, all thanks to Anya's clever manipulation. Within minutes, we were headed to a nearby cafe, and from there, we made our way to Anton's place. At that point, Anton had already settled into a comfortable 2-bedroom apartment. As fate would have it, I ended up spending the night there too. The next morning, I struggled to open my eyes. My head was pounding like church bells, my eyes struggled to focus, and my limbs trembled as if filled with glass wool. Suddenly, a refreshing glass of water appeared in my limited field of vision, pulling me away from my body's inventory. After taking a sip of the cold drink, life felt a little more bearable. I was able to distinguish that it was Anya who had brought me the drink, and not Anton himself. "The coffee's already brewing, made with a special anti-hangover recipe," the girl said. I barely made it to the kitchen, not wanting to seem like a decrepit old man in the eyes of the younger generation. The coffee turned out to be magical, and it wasn't long before I felt like a human being again. That's when I noticed that it was just the two of us in the kitchen. Anton was still asleep. "He left for work a while ago," I said with a knowing tone. "He wanted me to help bring you back to life and wait for him. He has big plans for the cottage. He wants to fix it up so he can stay there during the summers." On Saturdays, Anton usually disappears to work, afraid that everything will fall apart without him. Meanwhile, I am left waiting for him at home, wondering what the weekend will bring. Sometimes he returns by lunchtime, but other times he is gone for days and nights. I never realized how tough the life of a modern entrepreneur can be. I used to think they spent their days relaxing and sipping champagne in restaurants. When I shared this thought with Anya, she laughed and said that many people think the same thing. However, the reality is that Anton often works long hours and sacrifices his personal time to keep his business running. It was surprising that he was able to leave early yesterday. After having another cup of coffee, I sat down to watch TV while Anya, like a busy bee, started doing household chores. Eventually, she made her way to the living room with a rag and a vacuum cleaner. I couldn't help but admire her slim figure and long legs as she worked, and her russet braid and blue eyes reminded me of a character from a fairy tale. Her lack of makeup only added to her natural beauty. However, it seemed that Anya was completely unaware of my interest. As I sat there, lost in thought, it felt as though Anya was miles away from me. I couldn't help but imagine her as my wife, finishing up the cleaning and turning off the fragrant borscht, so we could take a stroll along the spring boulevards. Anton didn't show up until after a hearty lunch, and the food tasted even better after my bachelor bites. He had big plans for his dacha, wanting to expand the house, create a parking lot, and build a pergola. He planned to visit the site the next day, so I decided to spend the night again to avoid wasting any time. Throughout the night, I dreamt about Anya in unexpected scenarios. I woke up the next morning feeling completely exhausted and struggled to gather my thoughts. The dacha was beautiful. The sun was shining, birds were chirping, and daffodils and tulips were blooming. Anya wasted no time and began clearing away old leaves with a rake. Meanwhile, Anton and I explored the house, but as someone who knew little about construction, I found myself nodding along to my son's explanations without really understanding much. Nevertheless, I was impressed with his plans for the future building, and the dacha began to feel even more cozy and charming. We had planned to begin work in May, which meant we had plenty of weekends ahead of us. Young people would help with the planting while the builders would take care of their own tasks. The day passed quickly, with Anya and me working in the garden, while Anton rushed around managing his own workers on the construction site. Since his business was in construction, the work was progressing at a rapid pace. The sun was so warm that it felt like summer, causing Anya to remove her sweater and reveal a tight-fitting t-shirt. I found myself distracted and even stopped digging the beds for a moment. I found myself mesmerized by the hourglass figure of Anya and the light muscles that gently shimmered beneath her silky skin. I realized how silky her skin was when I casually touched her hands. As lunchtime approached, we made our way to wash our hands and faces. I teased Anya for getting so dirty in the soil. After washing up, I threw a towel around her neck, pulled her close, and kissed her tenderly. Anton watched on with affection. The following day, work continued, but my son remained in town. We had to clear out some construction debris and take it out to the street since something had slowed down at another construction site, and Anton had to go and give everyone a push. Anya kindly offered to help me, but we got stuck in a narrow path and couldn't turn around. My sister-in-law blushed and asked if we would make it through. I assured her that I would figure it out, and finally managed to get through with a loud thud. However, I didn't like the way Anya blushed at lunch. Later, she started to feel a little feverish, and her skin turned red and hot. I was worried that she might have gotten burned. Based on my experience as a gardener, I have learned to handle such situations promptly. As we entered the house, Anya removed her shirt, and I retrieved some sour cream. As I applied the cool cream to her skin, she let out a small hiccup, and I became increasingly engrossed, moving from her shoulders to her back and chest. However, she halted me, indicating that it was not the appropriate time or place for such actions. She decided to stay home to avoid further complications as her absence from work was already causing issues. As I lazily dug into the ground, memories of her supple body lingered in my mind. Eventually, after a month of hard work, we completed the outhouse and the whole family decided to commemorate the occasion. Anya prepared some food for the celebration. I obtained some authentic moonshine from a neighbor, and it was quite enjoyable. In just half an hour, we were in high spirits. After a tiring workday, Anton barely finished his meal before retiring to bed. Anya and I stepped out onto the porch, where the warm breeze enveloped us, and the flowers exuded a delightful aroma. The moon, casting a gentle glow, illuminated the surroundings. As moonbeams danced on Anya's face, she appeared as a mystical princess. The radiance flickered on her lips and lingered on her eyelashes. Something overtook me in that moment, and I approached her with force, pressing my body against hers, and my lips firmly latched onto hers. Initially, Anya resisted, but eventually she relaxed, closed her eyes, and tentatively responded to the kiss. However, my past experience did not justify my actions. Once upon a time, all the girls in the neighborhood were drawn to me. Realizing there would be little resistance, I began to touch her inappropriately. Anya whispered, "Anton, honey." I stopped, but she leaned into me, demanding to continue. I could no longer resist her advances, and that's the end of the story. Share in the comments. What do you think of the situation and the behavior of the characters? And thank you for listening to the story to the end. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Have a nice day.